reality in disguise. Put your fist up in the sky.
I am Canson, the founder of New Verse Live, formerly known as Remnants Gathering, and today I will be discussing what I feel is affecting most relationships right now. And I know that that is a broad statement, but I'm going to explain to you what I mean. I want to start this conversation off by first saying this. There are a couple of words I highly recommend you begin researching to understand relationship dynamics and their connection to your childhood conditioning. The first of those words is neurodivergent. Okay? The reason neurodivergent is very important right now is due to the fact that many people on this planet right now do not have the, how can I put it? They do not have the brain anatomy that they was born with. Why are we seeing such an increase in Asperger's, autism, narcissism, personality disorders, depression, anxiety, and even high-functioning depression? The reason we're seeing this increase in this can be various things. Some of those things are the power structures that have been ruling the world for ages. One main power structure is the education system. The education system has been infiltrated with mental psychological enslavement curriculums. The United States is not known for having the most intelligent students, and there's a reason for that. I'm going to touch on neurodivergent just a little bit more before I give you the second term that I feel it would benefit you to do some research about. Neurodivergent can include ADHD, which is something I definitely resonate with. It's an attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity of the mind. Some of the traits of that could be jumping from topic to topic. Maybe in conversation you have a difficult time sticking to one thing. Maybe it's difficult for you to complete tasks that you began. Maybe it's difficult for you to organize. These are just a few ADHD symptoms. Autism, and there are various levels of autism. So none of this in which I am expressing to you right now is cookie cutter. It's different from person to person. And there are levels to these different conditions. So with autism, there are developmental delays within the brain, and this ultimately creates the symptoms of autism. Autism isn't something that only children deal with. If you think back to the early 90s, there was this huge rise in autism, ADHD, and many forms of drugs to manage them. Those kids from the 90s and upwards have now become adults. How did those medications affect their brain development? That's one thing to consider. The second thing to consider, is it possible that these specific drugs made people more prone to drug abuse when they became adults? Okay, we had Adderall and Ritalin. They were calling these the smart drugs. Now, I have personal experience with this, and I allowed my child to be prescribed this for her ADHD. One of the worst decisions I ever made in parenting. And it turned her into a zombie. And her depression and anxiety levels actually increased. And they told me that there was a possibility of suicidal ideation, for me to watch her very closely. And this was a really stressful time in our lives. Is it possible that taking certain medications for fever when we were babies and children had a role to play in this rise in autism? Let me share with you a little bit about autism in case you're wondering, how does this relate to me? I don't have any of those things, because I thought that too until I started to do more research. Now, autism is also one of the neurodivergent manifestations we are seeing rise in its numbers. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And some of the characterized traits are difficulties with communication, social anxiety, repetitive behaviors like special interests where they can focus on one thing for very long periods of time. And we can also see issues with emotional blindness. This is the inability to feel their own feelings, to identify what they're feeling, to isolate their feelings from others. These symptoms can range from barely noticeable to significantly impacting their lives. Another difficulty is reading social cues, picking up on body language and facial expressions. They may struggle with seeing things for what they really are. It may be difficult for them to tell when someone is upset, when someone may be grieving, when someone maybe just need a hug or somebody to talk to. So if you happen to be in a relationship and you feel like there is a lot of miscommunication, and in conversation, the motive behind your conversation is not being perceived in the way you are intending, there is a high chance that high-functioning autism may be playing a role. So this is why I want you to do research, because we are no longer on the old earth where we have these relationship difficulties and we just sum it all up to, this person is just a dog. This female, she's just a controlling Jezebel hoe. This, that's how it used to be. She's just being a bitch. He's just an asshole. And narcissism, that conversation was the beginning of us having a more in-depth understanding of these different personality developmental issues that are often rooted in childhood trauma. Complex PTSD is the next one. Research complex PTSD. I've talked about it here on the channel, but again, I'm not a psychiatrist. So do your own homework. But I will go over a few symptoms here just to give you an idea of what I am hoping to give clarity on, and I'm going to build this up to what's happening today for many of us. Difficulty regulating your emotions. This can include intense and overwhelming feelings of fear, shame, and anger. A difficulty of perceiving yourself the way you actually are. So this could be having a difficulty with seeing yourself as someone who is worthy of love, seeing yourself as someone who is confident. Your self-concept may be more negative than it is positive. Another sign of complex PTSD is difficulty with interpersonal relationships, having trust issues, fear of abandonment, and a tendency to form unhealthy and intense relationships. Y'all know them relationships that was toxic, but it felt really, really good in the beginning, and it seemed like the attraction and the passion was just intensely amplified, only to lead to burnout, sadness, grief, depression, arguments, difficulty resolving conflict, right? Like those relationships, they typically start off hot and steamy. And if you're dealing with someone who has CPTSD and hasn't done any soul work, or if it's you, then these are some of the things that will be difficult for you in relationships. Another one is hyperarousal. We can definitely see that now, where sexually people have a difficult time disciplining themselves. This is another symptom. Hypoarousal, having a difficult time engaging in sexual activities and having a healthy libido. Another one is hypervigilance, and this is when you are super attuned to everything and everyone in your environment and aware of even the smallest nuances of anything that you may be energetically picking up on or emotionally reading the room, so to speak. Irritability is another one, and outbursts of anger. This is just when you just get triggered and you just lose it. You pop off. You go 0 to 60. Disassociation is another. A sense of feeling detached, like no matter what you do or no matter what happens in your relationship with your partner, like there's always this feeling of detachment, and like you're drifting away, or you've drifted away. You don't know how to heal that. Another one could be difficulty focusing and actually concentrating on the things that are important. Intrusive thoughts, just having stuff pop in your head out the blue, and it's usually something that's negative and critical that actually makes you feel worse. Yet to not think about it is difficult. You can have emotional flashbacks where maybe you don't know exactly why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. But sometimes you may have amounts of anger produced from a trigger, and it just seems disproportionate to the situation that's happening in front of you. Maybe a sense of helplessness, feeling like you lack the ability to control the direction of your life. All of these things are symptoms of CPTSD. There are many others, and again, this can change from person to person. And I do believe that a lot of us have this and are dealing with it, and we don't quite know what's happening because there's so much going on, and it can be overwhelming. trying to pinpoint these things. And a lot of us, we really weren't raised with the belief that seeking out therapists and counselors and life coaches, mindset coaches, things like this is new for a lot of us. This is something we're exploring and establishing to help in our mental health challenges. Now, another that I feel like I have definitely my master's degree in codependency. I'm like the codependent queen, but now I'm the codependency recovery queen because I have been on the mend since 2012. Codependency is a behavior condition where a person's self-worth and identity becomes intertwined with other people, their needs, and how they are behaving. A codependent person may feel anxious or guilty when they're not meeting the needs of others. And this guilt can lead to self-martyrdom, willing to do anything to make it better, even at the expense of your own well-being. Codependency usually stems from early experiences in childhood where a person had to focus on the needs of others to ensure their own survival, to ensure their own emotional security. And that was the case for me. Some of the ways codependency can manifest is a difficulty saying no, setting boundaries, and prioritizing your own needs. A strong desire for approval or affection from others. A tendency to take responsibility for other person's feelings or actions in your life. Difficulty expressing your feelings or needs in an honest and direct manner. Another symptom is feeling responsible to fix everything and solve everybody's problems. Oftentimes, people aren't asking for your help, and you offer unsolicited advice. You overcommit. You agree to do things that really is not going to be beneficial for you. This could be giving somebody money when you're down to your last. This could be listening to somebody complain about something you listen to them complain about all the time. So it's not like this is a healthy venting situation. It's just kind of, I call it trauma dumping, right? Just dumping all of the trauma and frustration onto you. It's not healthy to continue to do that. Another one is being able to distinguish your thoughts and feelings and beliefs from others. And oftentimes, we inherit the thoughts and beliefs of others. That's passed down to us through tradition, through the culture, education, through church, through music, entertainment, the group of people we grew up around or hang out with. Another one is a sense of fear and anxiety when you're faced with the possibility of being rejected or disapproved by others. Codependency definitely is something that I feel is harming us in a very detrimental manner right now, and I think most of it is unconscious. So now that I've shared with you a few neurodivergent personality disorders, and some of the things, all of these things, I believe, are rooted in trauma. And on this channel, the goal was for me to share my journey, the lessons in my spiritual awakening. So I know that in the past, my focus was working with external tools, spirituality, mystical systems, and all of those things are very much a part of my journey still. But I'm shifting the focus to pinpointing some of the things we may not be aware of, may benefit from being tested to see what's happening, because the tendency to spiritual bypass, to use spirituality as a band-aid but not really get to the root of the problem, that is a huge epidemic happening right now. And I don't want to do anything that I have discovered to be something that will delay your journey. So this is why the content on this channel is shifting to what's happening inside of your subconscious mind, what are the symptoms, and what can be done about it. All right. Now, back to the codependency conversation. For women right now, we were put on pedestals for being codependent. A woman's value was often determined by how well she took care of other people. Wasn't determined by how well she can take care of herself. And this one thing, without me going into any other manifestation of trauma, this one thing alone has led to autoimmune disease, mental health breakdowns, weak immune systems, arthritis, digestive issues, respiratory issues, migraines, headaches. And not only that, but the physical manifestations of being codependent is one thing, but the transgenerational effects of that, the way this impacted our children and our grandchildren, that is a trauma reenactment. And if we do not become aware of the areas where we are doing these things, we become the antithesis of what was supposed to be a solution by being chosen to heal some of these things in the bloodline. Now, what were some of the significant things that many people do not talk about that led to this? Religion. Religion means to bind. And in religion, the first two wives of Adam, neither of them was perceived to be divine. Both of them were blamed for taking actions that had not been pre-approved by their man or God. And because of that, there's this curse that is still affecting us today. That one thing alone is such a terrible narrative. And this is the foundation in which many of us were raised to believe was true. Before a young girl had a chance to be confident in her feminine energy, in her ability to use her spiritual superpower of being intuitive and empathic, was damaged by these beliefs. Not only that, but all throughout the Bible, women were pretty much to blame for most of what was going wrong in their relationships, in their communities, and in the whole world. Okay? By assigning men as the decision maker, the head of the household, giving them the power of the world, right? This is a man's world. The patriarchal system came after the matrilineal system, which was based more around the abilities of the feminine to lead our villages, our communities, our tribes, the ability to have foresight, to prophesy. These things have been demonized. I'm going to say this, and I know that this may be difficult for some of y'all to hear, but you need to hear it. If you listen to me, then you're not here to hear what everybody else is saying. The perspective that I present is the one that people may not be aware of or are uncomfortable with admitting out loud. By men being in the position of being the rulers, the heads, the lawmakers, and the woman is supposed to be submissive and follow, okay? Look at the state of our families and our relationships right now. I'm sure that most of us could agree that dysfunction has been glorified and our natural divine state of being has not. So this means that the amount of responsibility that men are supposed to feel is actually higher than reality of what most men feel responsible for. After watching a few videos and podcasts that I share on the community channel, I've realized that a lot of men struggle to take accountability, to see how they are responsible. Because if indeed he is to be the head, then that means what we see happening now is actually more so on them than the feminine being who was taught to submit, that she was the weaker vessel. And at one point in time, we weren't allowed the simple things that are actually a manifestation of our human rights, like owning land, being able to make our decisions about what we do with our body based on our own beliefs and values. Up to 2023, Roe versus Wade was overturned, and a lot of women were not allowed to get abortions unless they had the approval of their man. This is modern day. A lot of men feel like they're not responsible for what's happening in the family and in relationships. And the reason for that, from my experience, is trauma, unhealed, unprocessed trauma. The inability to perceive the role that they have played because society has actually groomed men to be in a perpetual state of victimhood and immature emotional intelligence. The emotional quotient is low. A lot of men thought that it was enough to provide and pay bills. A lot of us grew up watching our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers and great-aunts be with men, and maybe that was the only thing that they provided. But there was no emotional reciprocity. There was no connection. The woman wasn't viewed as an equal. Cause and effect is a law of the universe. The law of attraction shows us that every single action is going to have an impact. And so this is not to demonize men, because they are victims to this a very toxic societal conditioning, just as women are. Most black men grew up eating foods that calcify their pineal gland, foods that imbalance their limbic system and nervous system. Most black men grew up suppressing their anger because it wasn't safe for a black man to show his anger. That could lead to being murdered, imprisoned, right? Even going to hell if you think about religion. Religion does not support healthy anger. Religion was more so communicating to men that you are to not act on or in these emotions, because it's not godly, it's not holy, it's not Christ-like. A lot of men were raised and told, to not be emotional, and they suppress their emotions. They suppress the way they really felt. Now that part of them has been compartmentalized and is difficult to access. And any emotion that is repressed, it doesn't disappear. It's going to remain and circulate within the subconscious mind, in the body of the person who is suppressing these emotions. And eventually, it's going to be purged and come to the surface. And that's what the age of Aquarius is all about. The collective awakening. This stuff is coming to the surface, whether we want it to or not, whether we like it or not. They call their homes cribs. They call their friends grown men, their boys. We call them, that's my baby boy. These colloquialisms and phrases. This is emotional genocide. And we're now seeing the impact of generation after generation, decade after decade of this. Not only that, but on an epigenetic level, the amount of torture that certain cultures experience is imprinted within their cellular structure, and it's still impacting them today. You don't become aware of these things and they just go away. On top of that, women have been expected to carry a lot of weight. Women are to be providers. Women are supposed to work at the hustle culture, the grind hard culture, right? Women are also supposed to give birth to children, and all while they're working at the same time, and pay bills and provide and be the cook and be the meal prep, and most of the time do the chores. And if you have a man that works, the least you can do is wash his clothes and cook his dinner, but you work too, right? Women have become the nurses of the family, the doctors of the family, the peacekeepers of the family, the mediators. Oftentimes, the feminine dominant being is more connected to her emotions. She's more intuitive and empathic. And so that oftentimes leads to us being in a position of being the emotional regulators in our household. And if you're in a relationship with a man who has unprocessed trauma, has childhood wounds from adverse traumatic events, not just in this life, but whatever happened in the womb of his mother affected him, and whatever happened in his bloodline affected him, and whatever past life karma he may have affected him in this life as well. So we have these many different aspects of what creates this toxic soup that we have been swimming in, right? So men felt like they had power and they were the dominant being. But when a woman is having to regulate everybody's emotions in the house to try to create some type of harmony and homeostasis in the home, that's a lot of burden on her. But it also can be very triggering and cause frustration in her man, because men do not like to feel like they're being controlled, dominated, told what to do. Nobody does, but especially men, because of the masculine ego, the toxic masculinity. These programs based in the 3D matrix of these social constructs. So what happens when the awakening happens and a man realizes, I don't know how to sustain a relationship with a feminine dominant being. I don't know how to be with her and her intense emotions because I struggle to be with my own. And if this man happens to also have poverty contracts and beliefs that support that, and maybe the woman is making more money, this is just another reason to be frustrated. A lot of times men are seeking to feel more in control of their life by dominating their partner. And it's not their fault. This is a systemic subconscious conditioning. And we can take this all the way back to cartoons. Look at some of the old black and white cartoons. Just go back and check it out. And you will see how toxic the depictions of what relationships look like was before we had enough brain development to isolate what's healthy and what's not. The DVD for The Little Mermaid and the VCR tapes had a penis hidden within the castle on front of it. Lion King had sex written in the air. I could go on and on and on. Nickelodeon, we've seen these things. These things were priming us and conditioning us to lack the skills to have healthy relationships. Now add into that entrainment, because the first 7 years of our lives we're in theta state. We're absorbing everything in our environment. The subconscious mind is receiving its programs. The entrainment of music. What used to be hip-hop, a creative self-expression of the oppression and many things that we were facing, was weaponized. We watched Snoop Dogg walk down the red carpet with women crawling on their knees like dogs with collars and leashes. That affects us subconsciously. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, and words create our universe, well, just imagine how many words, beliefs have been programmed into your own subconscious mind. I saw a post about Little Scrappy, and his wife Bambi Bams was expressing her frustration with his ability to prioritize bills and paying the rent on time and things like that. And she just felt burdened and overwhelmed with having to be the one to nurture and raise the children and be with them and take care of bills and work, and all of this is literally exactly what I'm talking about. Well, if you go by this conversation alone, it's safe to say that Little Scrappy may have some complex PTSD. He may have some high-functioning autistic traits. He may have some narcissistic traits. When you think about religious texts and the way it depicted men and their dominance in the world, I mean, they could just write a letter and divorce their wife, and nobody else wanted her after that, right? Tamar, a young girl in the Bible, she was raped, and after being raped, she wasn't worthy to get married anymore. Nobody wanted her. Sarah almost got raped, Abraham's wife, and Abraham didn't have enough courage to admit that she was his wife, and he said she was his sister, and she almost got raped by the king for that. This is the same woman who was willing to bring in a third party to be able to give him a child. Like, do you see the picture that I'm painting for you here? And I believe that very soon we're going to see that most men in the indigenous minority, quote-unquote, community, they're dealing with these brain developmental issues. Think about it. We grew up on jungle juice, drinking chocolate milk and eating pizza loaded with government cheese on it. Like those foods hold data. Processed foods make it difficult to process your emotions. Sugar, just that one thing alone, it dysregulates the nervous system. You add on top of that the impact of slavery. Of course, we're going to be having relationship issues. Of course, we're going to be noticing the areas where we fall short. Some of the other things that I want to share, because the divine feminine is being liberated and balance is returning to the planet. This is the energy of Mayat. She's the goddess of balance. She's represented by the scales, very Libra energy. Well, as this is happening, the masculine is beginning to feel more inadequate by the day. Each and every time a woman notices areas where she's been codependent, where she gives more than she receives, and she starts journaling and doing the work and meditating, taking care of her body, healing her womb, paying more attention to what she's putting in her body, changing her hygiene products that she's using, creating routines for her well-being. The more that we are doing this work, the more visible these hidden issues are going to become. And the ego is fragile. Male fragility and ego, this is the dark side of a lot of the power systems throughout age of Pisces that we were existing in. And many of us were raised by people who were entrained by this same deceptive energy. So a woman being fully in her feminine energy, she's going to know that she's worth more. She's going to see the areas where she has devalued her own self. As she is doing the work to heal these things, then that is going to allow what has been hidden to be seen. And if you are operating in ego, this is going to feel like some type of power is being taken away from you. And this may trigger abandonment and rejection in a lot of men. A very high percentage of men in their 50s, late 40s, 50s, 60s, when they get sick, there's nobody there to really help them. The kids not really around, and the baby mamas or the wives or whatever, like, they're not in their lives. This is that pendulum swing. This is the effect of the toxic masculine conditioning. So a lot of them are dying of stroke and heart disease and high blood pressure, liver disease, colon cancer, prostate cancer. The list goes on and on. So their health is being affected as well. There have been more breakups and divorces since the pandemic than any other time that I can ever remember. Until men acknowledge the role that they played in what may have very well been unintentional abuse as a result of being enabled and made to feel like they were the head, the ruler, dominant, the stronger vessel, right? As this is occurring, we're going to see more separation, divorce, and breakups. But it is difficult to really grasp this until you have experienced it yourself. And just in my neighborhood alone, most of the couples that seemed to be happy and successful when we moved in this neighborhood, they have separated and divorced or just living in two different houses and co-parenting. I saw this coming. And I mentioned the movie Kingsman. I highly recommend you watch Kingsman, and you'll get a deeper understanding of the way sound weapons and frequencies play a role in the psychological state of mind that we are in. One thing that personally I have dealt with, and it's been difficult for me as a highly sensitive person, and I'm an empath and recovering codependent, right? So this is just a setup for me to always give, and very rarely receive the reciprocation of what I'm giving. These patterns don't end overnight, and it takes time. But what has helped me more than anything is facing the darkness, facing the void, facing the deep abyss of unmet needs, facing the truth that I have absorbed everybody else's trauma, everybody else's pain, and I have painted a smile on my face and carried the weight of the world on my shoulders for most of my life. To love myself means to set healthy boundaries, not just around my dynamic with others, but my own dynamic with my thoughts, my beliefs, and the way I treat myself. Men were used to domesticate women because the fear of a woman in her power, a woman's ability to communicate with herbs, animals, nature, crystals, to be able to construct her words in a way that creates a desired outcome, was termed as witchcraft. That is actually the divine birthright, the divine imprint on a woman to be able to do those things. And men were used to suppress us, to domesticate us. The whole women are weaker vessels. Eve made a terrible decision. Adam blamed Eve. Adam blamed Lilith. God blamed Eve. God punished Lilith. Like, what? Just take out any ideas you may have about religion, because I know that this can create cognitive dissonance and internal conflict, because a lot of us grew up with that, and those instructions we were taught were the basic instructions before leaving Earth. So there is a heartbreak when you realize that you are someone who survived religious abuse, religious trauma. That's a real thing. So just set that aside for a moment and just think about what I'm saying. What was this teaching to us as children? What was the truth that wasn't directly being spoken, but it was being communicated? Because it definitely sounds like a woman cannot be trusted. She's a witch. Women are so toxic and terrible that the wisest man on this planet ever, Solomon, was taken down out of his divinity by women being pagan seductresses and witchcraft. Blame all through religious texts, blame. And ironically, in some religions, once men die, they're going to be given virgins in heaven. What kind of message is that? Who wants their virgin daughter to be given to a grown-ass man to do whatever he want to do with you for eternity? That is despicable, and it's unacceptable. The dark feminine, the raw, primal, instinctual essence of the feminine is that of a warrior, that of a healer, that of a high priestess. A woman is the embodiment of bliss. She's meant to experience orgasms, to climax, not just sexually, but to have this pleasure principle that meets her throughout her life. That is our birthright. We have the capacity to conduct bliss through our bodies in such a way that the church figured out ways to create narcissistic smear campaigns about the feminine. And the men who have not done the work yet, and maybe they're trying and they're working through it now, but unconsciously, in their unconsciousness, in their subconscious patterns, may be suppressing this wild primal energy that is awakening in the woman, in fear of being abandoned, in fear of being told that you can't turn a hoe into a housewife, because sexual liberation is also an aspect of being a sovereign being. So to avoid shame, men were taught to control your woman, to keep her in check. I mean, what pimps and hoes do is not really that different than what we see depicted as a healthy dynamic in religious texts of the Abramovic religions. Let me be clear, okay? Because some spiritual systems teach that the highest initiation has to occur with the feminine, going back into the womb space. So now we can see how the power has been misconstrued, created division and struggle. This illusion that we have existed in is being torn down, and it's for our benefit, but it's going to feel uncomfortable on this journey. Janelle Monáe, who I just adore, she has definitely been stepping out of that respectability expectation and just being free to express herself creatively as a sovereign being, self-realized, self-actualized, self-deified, just loving all that she is and not hiding in of it. And reading the comments on the post of her outfit that she wore to Met Gala just was really hurtful. That people feel like her value is based in the way that she dress, what she wear. Saying things like, you're no longer a respectable woman because of what you wore to the Met Gala. You're no longer a respectable woman because of what you have expressed about your sexuality. You're no longer a respectable woman because of this and that. There is so much pressure put on the feminine to be perfect and fit into the mold of what we were programmed to believe a woman was supposed to be. No wonder the highest amount of deaths occur in hospitals when black women are giving birth to their children. No wonder. Not only are we demonized for sexual expression because Sierra is well and people drug her and her man and just said how he was a weak man and that he didn't like what she had on at the red carpet event. It just goes on and on and on. And it is time for us to release our judgment, our criticism, and that thing that we do where we guilt and shame people for expressing what they feel is their authentic self. As long as that's happening, none of us will be free. As long as we are existing in a state of judging others in this way, as if fabric determines a woman's value or how much fabric she's using. Come on now. That's old earth 3D matrix beliefs and programs. And that ultimately is what's anchoring the chaos in this world. In cultures where men understand this, they know the purpose of a woman. Cultures that practice tantra, they're not suppressing and domesticating their women. You'd be surprised at some of the cultures where women maybe wear a lot of fabric, but their ceremonies and their tantric rituals is what's bringing abundance to their community and their culture. A woman's sensual energy is a gateway to the higher dimensions. Her body is created to be able to not only conjure a soul from the unseen realm to materialize into a physical being inside of her body, to give birth to this soul, to have this human experience. Why can't a woman decide what she does with her body? It makes absolutely no sense to me for men to feel that a piece of paper from the Justice of Peace basically gives you ownership over your woman. None of us own each other. We're not supposed to. But a lot of us think that relationships are founded on these outdated beliefs. And I'm not saying that people should just tell their woman, just go and have sex with whoever you want to, because I heard Campson saying that, it brings abundance to the cultures that have these tantric practices, and they're not suppressing the feminine's expression or her sexual, sensual, sovereign experience. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, it's time for us to question our relationships. Are they founded on fear and control and dominance, ownership, objectification? Or are they founded in love, acceptance, compassion, being able to love someone just as they are? And we're changing. I'm always changing. I am never the same. And one thing you will never see with any content that I create is stagnancy. I refuse to be stagnant in this journey. Having two near-death experiences in this lifetime, it definitely gave me a higher perspective of the suffering that a lot of us unconsciously cause. To sum this up, and I'm going to be talking about this more and more, but to sum this up, we have emotionally arrested the development of what it takes to have a healthy relationship. Men have been catered to, didn't really have the same glass ceiling women had. They didn't really have to nurture their feminine side. Most men don't even know that that's a thing and it exists. However, women, to survive in a man's world, we had to operate in masculine energy. So I'm not saying that every single woman in the world is emotionally more intelligent than a man, but I would dare say most. And the next time you see something happening in the world or your own relationship, think about some of the things that I said in this video, and you'll see, no, this is not just two people who are toxic. This is two people who are traumatized, and maybe we're in a trauma bond, maybe we're trauma enmeshed, maybe we was mistaken thinking that love bombing was falling in love. You know? Why does love have to be a fall? It's time for us to rise in love. And the only way to do this is to do the work on yourself, to shift the focus to what you can control, release what you cannot. And with Saturn being retrograde in Pisces, there's going to be a lot of reorganization of our emotional boundaries and self-expression. So, if you're wondering if somebody that you're in a relationship with is narcissistic or you, we grew up in a narcissistic society. All of us have some of those traits, and that's okay. What's not okay is to continue to ignore them, to not take the time out to seek answers, to do the work. Hire coaches, hire a relationship coach, hire a therapist, work with someone, have an accountability circle. A lot of men don't have that. A lot of women don't either. But this conversation, since it's Father's Day, I wanted to direct it more so to the pain that men are creating in their relationships, in their unconsciousness, and inability to conduct the energy of empathy, compassion, and patience. As a woman, we have carried more responsibility of our relationships than men. And now it is no longer safe for any of us to ignore our unmet needs, to ignore what our body is communicating to us, and our mental health. There is no shame in getting help with that. I highly recommend that you do research and see, are any of these things showing up in your world, in your relationship? Because once you become aware of the issue, then you can begin repairing it. But if it is too uncomfortable to face your own self, you're not going to be successful in relationships with someone else. And if you struggle with the inner critic, negative self-talk, self-doubt, lack of confidence, watching men and young boys get shot and killed and murdered and spine broken and choked to death. We've been through a lot. And we're living in a time now where the strange fruit hanging from trees is popping up on our feed every day. And that's affecting us. And I don't believe men have really had the space, time, awareness, and knowledge to actually deal with the root of these things. So it's easier to see the woman and her shortcomings as the problem. I'm going to go deeper into this later. But if you did not get anything else from this, I want you to remember that anything you are going without in life can be achieved by going within. If you go within, you will not go without. You have the power. We are scripting our lives with new verses. We're not living by the verses that have been passed down to us for eons that are no longer serving us and are actually supporting dysfunction and creating more trauma enmeshment. It is time for you to take your power back and realize that everything that you need is inside of you. And for the women, my heart also goes out to you. It is very difficult to say no and to use boundaries. For a long time, we were not allowed the freedom to say no to sex to our partners for fear that this so-called devil would take control of our relationship. That's in Corinthians. I studied the Bible from beginning to end. And now that I look back, I see the roots of codependency. I see the roots of fear and abandonment. I see the roots of narcissism. To be told that giving someone your shirt and your coat is righteous, that sounds like codependency. Because what happens if it's cold and I get sick and die? Am I supposed to be proud of myself for giving the shirt off of my back and my coat? And what does that look like to my children that look up to me? Codependency has been very life-negating in my family, and it almost killed me. And I'm grateful to still be on this side, to be able to share my own personal troubles and trauma so that we can continue to heal by being transparent, having the courage to be authentic and show up, and no longer live in fear of what others may think, because no one else has to live your life but you. And it makes absolutely no sense for us to keep doing the same thing we always done and expect a different outcome. I would love to hear from you. What do you think about this? What is your biggest takeaway? And for those of you who are ready to really do the work, start off with the 7-day challenge, the OBV challenge. Start off with something simple. It's not overwhelming. You'll be surprised at how much transformation can occur in 7 days. Make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter so that you will receive updates and notifications Sometimes I go live on different platforms where there's more freedom of speech. And also, check all of the links below in the description. There are many different ways that you can participate in the shift in consciousness, in the new paradigms that are being created to support yourself. We have a spiritual shop with all of the tools that you will need on your spiritual journey, courses and workshops. And I have a couple of guidebooks that are going to be rolling out really soon to help you create the life that you deserve and you are worthy of. We will all benefit from loving ourselves more than we have up to this point. And even though it may be triggering to the people in your life or the person you're in a relationship with, it's necessary. We can no longer ignore the wounds that are bleeding out, because when we do not acknowledge our wounds, we end up bleeding out over everybody in our lives, unaware that we were already wounded. We will think that they are the ones hurting us and wounding us. In actuality, you have a soul contract for the people that are in your life to help you see yourself and to shift your focus to your own journey of what you can control. There's a blessing in it all. May your third eye has just been kissed. Namaste, Numiste, one love, Ashe.